Welcome to Underworld UK, where Britain's darkest stories are brought to light. From the gritty streets of gangland London, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, from Curtis Warren to the Cray twins to county lines and modern day true crime, we cover everything. Bringing you new videos every week. Subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is put out.
They call him a legend in Wearside, a man whose reputation straddles myth and reality. This is the story of Ernie Bewick, a name whispered in pubs, a figure of local folklore, a man who claims battles in his past and walks the fine line between protector and provocateur. Over the next 12 to 15 minutes, we'll trace Bewick's life through his own words, public records, and those who've crossed paths with him, and ask how much of the legend holds up to scrutiny. Here's a hard slice of life from the north of England, a portrait of one of the region's hardest men, Ernie Bewick. Fiercely anti-drugs, his world is one of burly club doormen, gun-toting drug-dealing villains, straighteners, internecine rivalry, and the constant fear of ambush and even death. In 1997, Bewick killed another man in a fight outside the Sunderland pub. He admitted a charge of manslaughter and was jailed for 6 years. He is now a free man. Stephen Richards, the maverick investigative journalist, has had many of his 40-plus books serialized in the national press and magazines. He has appeared in many crime-related documentaries on national and international TV. He acts as a literary agent for crime writers, produces and directs crime documentaries, and also promotes members of the crime underworld on his website www.crimebiz.com. Stephen Richards writes in a distinctive vernacular style that's exemplified here. Ernie Bewick has been called a gangland killer and an enforcer, but I can tell you he's one of the most forgiving men I've come across. Okay, that might shock some of the family of Tony Waters, and it might shock those that have been spoon-fed lies and deceit, but it's the truth, and I always try to give you the truth until I find out otherwise. For those of you that might not have heard of Ernie Bewick, I'll fill you in with the details. 7 December 1997 was to be the last day in the life of convicted drug dealer Tony Waters. As a result of a fight, Waters, 44, lost his life outside the East Ender pub in High Street, East Sunderland. Waters deliberately went looking for Bewick with the intention of doing him some damage over an incident that took place the previous night between Bewick and two other men in Sunderland's Luciano's restaurant. Ernie Bewick was pursued head-on in a confrontation that was designed by Waters, and for that reason it goes against all of those that have advised since the death of Waters that he just wanted a quiet life since his release from prison some 4 years earlier. It would seem that some would want to paint Waters as a whiter-than-white character, and if that had been genuinely so, then you'd be reading a very different viewpoint here, but as it goes, I cannot write anything else. Waters left behind a family that grieve him to this day, and of course the time of year of his death compounds the pain and hurt they must feel for the loss of their loved one, but without fear of favour, such sentiment should be put to one side for a moment in order to reveal the depths of Waters' resentment for Bewick. Bewick was, and still is, anti-drugs. Waters was pro-drugs and was well known within the drug fraternity of the North and saw Bewick as a stumbling block to dealing his drugs in the pubs under his charge of doors, so any excuse for a confrontation would help in ridding Bewick from the area. Bewick, not a man to underestimate, was fully aware the way Waters was dealing drugs and knew that he was the difference between Sunderland being flooded with drugs or being kept relatively drug-free, and so long as he was in charge of certain pub and club doors, it would remain that way. In a similar way to how Viv ran door work, so did Bewick, and just as similarly as others wanted rid of Viv so they could deal in his patch on Tyneside, it worked in the same way on Bewick's territory on Wearside. Bewick and Graham had a lot in common, though I must stress that no one saw Bewick's integrity to rid his patch of drugs as much as Viv did, albeit regarding Graham in his way, it was agreed by his family to sense danger. Waters, a terrier-type person, met his untimely end as a direct result of his desire to import and sell drugs in Sunderland, ran into Ernie Bewick so that you can make your own mind up as to whether you agree with what I write. Directly from Ernie Bewick, the story unfolds with his account of the 2 fights he had with another hard man, Billy Robinson from Gateshead. Here Ernie Bewick accounts for the night he was working on a door when Billy Robinson and his party turned up. That night, I was called to the door, the Blue Monkey, and they said that Billy Robinson was at the door and he wanted to come in. Well, on that particular evening, it was the type where everybody had to pay when they came in. So I went up, and I really didn't know Billy at the time, and I explained that everybody had to pay to get in. His henchman standing beside him said, "Do you know who you're talking to?" and things like that. I said, "I'm sorry, but you've got to pay in." If anybody had asked me the same thing, I'd have said, fair enough. So then I was being called a little shit type of thing and abuse like that thrown at me. So I said, "Look, you can't come in." So he said, "Right, you little shit. Get round the corner, you little shit." I said, "Well, fair enough." So then Billy slapped me across the face and I went forward to go into him. He tried to punch me, so I ducked over the punch and gave him a right cross and an uppercut and knocked him out. Then his friends were there, his big henchman suddenly seemed to deflate, and I said, "Right, get him up and fuck off and don't ever come back here anymore." So they went. But obviously by then all the talk starts to generate, so obviously there were a few scares that they were going to come through team-handed at the door, and there were a couple of times we had to prepare for what might have happened. Months later, I heard rumours that I was going to be set up and different things. So one day Keith Bell, who changed his name to Keith Collins, came knocking at my door, trying to go on as though he was a friend. And he says, "Look, Billy wants to have a go at you, and he wants to see you as soon as possible for a 1-1 straightener." So I said, "Fair enough, I'll come now." He replied, "Well, can you not make it later on tonight? You know where I live, you've been to mine before. Can you come through?" We went through and it went on a couple of hours where we were talking, so I got something to eat at Keith's. Later on the fight was arranged at a gym in Jesmond which was owned by Andy Webb, a former Mr. Great Britain. Andy Webb was a gentleman, Viv was a gentleman, they were all nice and friendly. I came through by myself. Staggering to think that Ernie was fearless in turning up to such a venue on his own, but he did. I never brought anybody with me. I walked in their camp on my own. There were a few of them there, and Viv got on the phone to tell Billy I was there, and I kept waiting a further hour and a half to 2 hours before he came.
I remember feeling cold due to the lengthy waiting process, and Andy Webb was very good towards me, and he gave me a cup of tea to warm me, because by the time Billy had arrived, they'd been waiting 40-odd minutes round the corner. So I more or less explained to Viv that if I sorted out over a cup of tea without any trouble, then that's the way I preferred it. Again, staggering to think that Ernie was as calm as a cucumber, wanting to talk things over a cup of tea. And obviously the others there might have seen this as a sign of weakness, but Ernie's just that sort of guy, and not for 1 minute should he have been underestimated. It wasn't for nothing that his fists were called the peacemakers. I didn't want any trouble, but at the same time I went through, because if that was the way to solve it, fair enough. And Billy obviously wanted the fight on, so fair enough. So I went through there, and the fight arranged. It was a small compartment. There was a little bank that went up, and obviously I realised now that that was suited for Billy's needs. With me being a lot later, he could get me into there, or if I ran up the bank, I would slip or fall over, which I did at one point when I was fighting, but I got out of that anyhow. Billy came up to me, and he was a gentleman when he approached me. The first thing he said to me was, "Ernie, I want to shake your hands now before we have this fight, and I'm going to shake your hands after the fight." So I shook his hand, then we got on with the fight. Billy sort of stood in a boxer stance. I didn't underestimate him because he had a powerful punch, and later on as we became friends, he got a lot of trouble with someone, and he has got a powerful punch. So my strategies were to wear him out and then go in for it. That was my plan, but obviously time went through there. I stood there and I jumped about a bit, and I was flicking punches on him just to wear him out to come forward. The punches weren't really very hard. To be honest, I wasn't even properly warmed up because I'd been standing waiting all that length of time. So Billy was throwing lefts, coming forward with lefts, straight lefts, and trying to catch me with them. But obviously I was jumping about a little bit, flicking a punch here and there, getting him to move. And at one stage, Billy got on top of me, but I managed to quickly escape from underneath his arm, and I was back up on my feet in no time because I was only 13.5 stone at the time, and I was pretty fit and agile, and I could jump about a little bit. Wow, don't let Ernie fool you here. He's still very fit and looks like he could walk through a barn full of troublemakers. We stood, we bounced about a little bit again. He was trying to get his punches and I noticed he was open for a left hook. But something inside's telling me to hold that left hook back. So now I'm throwing right hands all the time. And now I'm warmed up and they're coming over strong. And I even said during the fight as a bit of hype, right, I'm warmed up now, I'm starting the fight off now. I don't know how long I was fighting. I cannot say if it was 5 minutes, but it wasn't half an hour or 3/4 of an hour. But when you think 5 minutes could be a long time for most fit fellas. Anyhow, I never took any punches. I might have had to a little bit, but nothing really hard. And I came in with a right hand all the time. I'd thrown a right hand and caught him with a left hook, so now I'm coming in to finish the job off. It would seem that Ernie was cruising in like a battleship. Billy's moving around, but as he's staggering over, I'm thinking, whoa, I've been caught with an uppercut. By then I fell over. It was a good punch. One of my hands was on the ground, so I put up the left hand, and then Keith Bell comes round and kicked me on my hand. I was embarrassed because I thought Billy was now the fight, because I'd been knocked over. I thought Billy was going to run in and kick me, because he would have been dead chuffed, and I was going to roll around and spring back up. That was the theme that went through my mind. You're confident, because that was the way it would go. So I knew I was vulnerable, because he could have run at me and kicked me. I got up, and that was the point I went berserk. I tore into him, split all his lips and that, and literally went straight at him. Come on! And just literally went straight at him as if to say, I'm not getting beat off anybody. I was really hyped up. Then I went forward and Viv grabbed me shouting, "Away Ernie, away Ernie," and things like that. So they stopped the fight, and I was dead confused because I'd realised Billy had knocked me over. But they said, "Away, you've beaten him fair and square." So then Billy went that way, and Viv went the other way, and I was confused, so I followed the way Viv went. Remember, walking away from that, I'd been involved in a fight, and I'd been hitting things like that, and for a minute my mind went a bit blank. So as I walked through the door, I remember walking into Viv, and he was sitting on the seat, and he was saying, "Look, I want no trouble. I want no trouble in this gym, mind." I said, "Look, I'll stand here with you." I folded my arms and stood beside him. Andy Webb was standing there, and Andy Webb's head was down like that. I don't know why. I thought it could be because of what Viv said, or he was embarrassed with the way Viv went on, because he seemed to be like an honourable type of person, and was nice towards me, and made me feel comfortable. I can remember that I went to the toilet, came back and then shook Viv's hand and everything, and we were all right. As I walked towards the door and went out, I could feel Viv watching me from behind. I knew without turning my head. When I got out, Billy was at the other side of the door, so he must have walked around and out some other way. He come up to me and hugged me, and I hugged him back, and we shook hands and everything. And just like what he had said before the fight, that he'd shake me hand after the fight, he kept his word. I'd previously boxed Viv Graham and I beat him in the ring. I was too strong for him pound for pound. I remember when I was young I used to idolise Rocky Marciano, and when I used to fight in the ring I didn't want to box, and I used to think clever to take punches, so I knew I could take a punch even though I'd boxed a few times. At that time I was silly, I was young, and it was daft the way I went on at that time. It's 17 to 18, we go through all sorts of phases, we grow up, don't we? Looking up to Rocky Marciano gave me mere strength. If I wanted to beat anybody, I just used to think of Rocky Marciano. He had that great big bowling ball, and you couldn't stop him, and that's the way I thought. So really, a little bit of that was still in me. Anyway, getting back to the fight with Billy. As I was getting back at the door, Keith Bell said, "You know what? Viv shouldn't have stuck that silly punch on you." I said, "See what you mean." And then I realised that it wasn't Billy that caught me, but it was Viv that did, and it all fitted into place then. Into the gym, and Viv was on the phone, and I think Keith was in the other room, although I'm speculating about that. When Viv finished, he came over and said, "Ernie, look, Billy was like a dad to me. He really brought me up when I was younger." I said, "Look, it was only a daft punch, forget about it." Viv said, "Is it okay if I come through to Sunderland?" I said that it would be alright, but I'm always like that. Even when I got out of prison, I forgave certain people for what they'd done against me. But I can't forgive people, and I realise everybody's got good points and everybody's got bad points. I try to motivate the good points in people, which isn't a bad thing, is it? But be careful, because the bad ones will take over.
Marciano is portrayed as a good man. His mother went to church and prayed for him. He come from an Italian type of family where his mother didn't like him getting into the ring and he didn't like his mother knowing he was getting hurt. So I suppose in a way, when you're reading books like that as a kid, maybe it's been reflected in me and kept me off the drugs and off the streets and got me into the gym training. People wanted to be like Marciano, but now people want to be like Tyson. After the fight with Billy, I maintained some links with Viv and we had a few discussions on the phone about it because I'd heard rumours going about that I'd been knocked out for 10 minutes. I discussed that with Viv and Viv explained, "Look, I hadn't said anything like that, Ernie. He told me that he had lots of respect for me and I came through there on my own."
Billy Hardy went through to Newcastle and he met with John Davison and Viv and all them, and he turned round and said, "Look, all of them through there, they've got loads of respect for you." But I was also hearing stories. What happened one was that Gavin Cook was asking me about what went on, and he said, "I've been in his company," and he says, "Yeah, knocked you out for 10 minutes. I said, "Look, if Viv ever wants his go at me." I heard Viv was very supportive towards me over a few things, because I've had trouble with the Siaz. We were threatened in Sunderland when they came with guns one night. There's a load of lads who'll tell you the truth about what happened. They come barging in. It was Gary Robe who ran the After Dark Club, and what happened was, Gary said, "Look, they're all barging in." Andy, Paul Ashton, now serving a total of 31 years imprisonment, was there. I said, "Don't worry, we'll get them out." I went up to the two Siaz, Michael and Stephen, and said, "Look, there's all of us. Are you daft or something?" There were some big hefty blokes with us, so I turned round and said, "If you run towards me, we'll do it that way then." They turned round and said that they had guns, so I said we also had guns. "He's got one there," I said, pointing to one of the men with me. I was only bluffing, but sure enough, one of them did have one as well. He actually went to his car, came back and told me he had one, but I never saw it. But I spread that about. I'm not a bloke that would like to use things like that, but from my point of view, it was a bit of bluff, and I wanted to get them off the premises, and they offered me violence, and I said, "Okay then, I'll have you two together, and I'm offering you two violence." In other words, if that's what you want. But there's loads of scenarios happen like that around the town. Anyway, the bluff worked with them and they cleared off. Sometime later, there was talk that one of the Sears was going to come through and have a go at me now. I heard that Viv went up to him, and he turned round and told the lad that was with the Sears that he was going to get knackered if he had to go at me. So one night when he come through to Sunderland, I sat and waited and confronted him and said, "I hear you going to have a go at me." Nah, don't want any trouble with you," was his reply, so I just left it. I built up a friendship with Viv and actually went through to his house and had a cup of tea with him and had a discussion over different things. I remember Gavin Cook was working with Viv through there in Newcastle, and he came through and said, "I've told Viv that you're not bothered about him, and I'm keeping out of it," so he has his phone number. He must have been matchmaking. And I said, "Look, I'm not going to back down from him, Gavin." So I pulled Viv up and said, "You're the one going round telling everyone that you knocked me out for 10 minutes. He replied, "Ernie, I've never said that. I've got nothing but respect for you, and you've got my respect." I replied, "Look, Viv, you've always had my respect. I've heard a lot about you, although the only thing is that you went round, you punched me, but you've always got my respect. But now you're going round saying you knocked me out."
Anyway, Viv was supportive towards me right to the end. I remember meeting one of Viv's friends called McNally from round where Viv had once lived in Rowlands Gill, and he said, "Honestly, Ernie, Viv Graham has had lots of respect for you," and he meant it. So I'll tell you that Viv was telling everyone I was a man and how I'd went on me own to the fight. There was another lad training with me in the gym, and he said, "You know something, Ernie? You should start to take notice of what some people say. I was training with Viv once, and he's got loads of respect for you." I ended up getting on well with Viv, but you've always got to remember that there's still a dividing line, and you do hear Chinese whispers and all that. I'd heard stories. How true they were I don't know, but he'd come and have a drink with you. He'd take you to the bar when he was ready, and as you go in, he'll put his arm around you, and all of a sudden it's bang, bang, and he's on you. Other stories were that he wouldn't take his coat off and stand in front of the man. It would be something like, "You all right, mate?" and then bang. So I was advised to be wary of that sort of stroke, so I kept that little bit of doubt in my mind. and I was very careful of how I went about it if I ever socialised with him, because he did want to come through here. I also heard that Viv liked to have an audience around him when he kicked off with a couple of lads who he might knock out, and then the word spreads, Viv knocked 3 lads the other night, you should have seen him. I mean, anybody can go and do that, but that's just the image. But anyway, it mightn't be true, because you hear all kinds of stories about me. You'll hear some good, and you'll hear some bad. There ends the interview relating to the Billy Robinson fight, and it goes to show what kind of a man Viv was, in the sense that he broke a code of conduct for his friend and mentor Billy Robinson when he punched Ernie in order to give Billy some time. Billy wouldn't have approved had he had time to say so, because afterwards he congratulated Ernie on a fair and square win. Maybe that's not the way it was meant to go, but it did. And I believe that when Ernie felt Viv's eyes burning into his back after the fight, that Viv may have been overawed at Ernie's resilience to his punch, and it maybe showed Viv that he'd ever had a toe-to-toe with Ernie then, as had happened in a past boxing match between them, then it would be Viv who would come out the loser. Ernie was forgiven towards Viv, and that comes across these type of characteristics he learned from his hero Rocky Marciano. As for Viv spreading rumours that he'd had Ernie knocked out for 10 minutes, it fits in with some rumours I'd picked up elsewhere, but of course such bravado helps maintain a hard image, and what better way to do it than to perpetuate the hardman image by embroidering on the truth as Viv seemed to do. Ernie is the classic hard man. Viv was the new breed, straddling the line between past and present. But Viv didn't have the inherent safety net that's bred into city dwellers, and that is what I believe Viv lacked and was to cause his eventual downfall. The delicate matter of Ernie being on prison licence made it difficult to talk about the Tony Waters murder, but the story I've heard time and time again was that Tony had it in for Ernie, and he'd made a cocked gun gesture with his hand and pointed it towards Ernie, indicating that Ernie was going to be shot. From a third party I was able to get the picture of the build-up to Tony Waters' death. That night Ernie was hit over the head with a bottle and his head was bleeding. The night before that, Ernie had a fight with Scott Waters when Ernie tried to eject him from a restaurant because he was being abusive. Word was spreading around town that it had taken 7 of them to sort out Scott Waters, a rumour apparently started by Waters. Ernie was in one of the pubs that Waters was in, and people were looking to Ernie to see what he would do to scotch this rumour, and it looked like Ernie was sucked into a vacuum of deceit and lies and reacted in a way that was out of sorts with his character. And he decided to approach Scott Waters. Ernie was maybe forced into this option in front of the very same crowd that had told Ernie about the rumours Waters was spreading, and because he couldn't back down, he confronted Waters head on. Ernie, as a consequence, knocked out Scott Waters. Further rumour has it then that Waters went back and told Tony Waters and a number of others that he was getting the better of Ernie Bewick, and in fact had supposedly decked Bewick twice when others intervened and jumped him. This twisted story was to be the death of Tony Waters, and the following day, police intelligence reports suggest that people were walking about with guns looking for Ernie Bewick, looking in all the wrong places it would seem, which gives rise to the fact that they probably wanted word to get back to Ernie Bewick that they were looking for him over the previous night's fight. They wanted to spread as much strength, and in the bargain, they wanted to frighten Ernie Bewick into staying away so that they could sell their drugs. Certain circles were advised to stay away from the town centre because there was going to be trouble. Ernie, being Ernie, wasn't going to stay away because it was his territory, and he had to show others that he wasn't going to hide away over something like this. My own intelligence strongly suggests that Ernie was told that there was trouble in a pub, although there wasn't any trouble at all. It was the perfect way to entice Ernie into another confrontation designed by Tony Waters in order to get Ernie Bewick to show.
On entering the East End pub, Ernie saw Tony, and they acknowledge each other. And the story goes that Tony asked what had happened the night before, and in Ernie's understated fashion, he told the truth. But Tony was having none of it, and gave Ernie an insult that was designed to cause further trouble. He called Ernie a liar. Scott Waters wasn't a fighter, and it would go against such a man as Ernie Bewick's own code of conduct to hand out the thrashing Waters said he received, but it didn't pull any weight with Tony, and Ernie was told to get outside the door, obviously for a 1-to-1. But as Ernie walked towards the door, he had a bottle thrown off his head, and a scuffle ensued, but all was in control, and Ernie then approached the man, Tony's stepson, who had thrown the bottle off his head, but the man's mother got in between her son and Ernie, and became protective towards her cherub of a son, who had just started the bottle off Ernie's head. The altercation seemed to have settled, and one of the doormen, Richie Lowes, had taken over the dialogue of settling everyone down, but Tony's stepson had now thrown another bottle, and this time it hit Ernie square on in his face. It beggars belief that Ernie didn't retaliate. He'd taken so much, and once more he was still in control, which takes some doing, considering the force with which a grown man can throw a bottle off someone's head and face. My inside source is able to tell me that Ernie pleaded with Tony to go and to forget about it. Surely 2 bottles started off Ernie's head should have been repayment enough, but Tony was shouting at a lot of people and wouldn't leave, and was now making a show in front of people and was walking to go out, then would make to go back inside, asking Ernie to come outside with him. Ernie by this time was telling Tony's wife the story that it was only him and Scott Waters that had the tussle, and that Scott had been lying about the 7 others. Tony Waters came back in for the 3rd time, and during this time Ernie was explaining things to Andrea Chisholm and remonstrating that she should ask the man that accompanied Scott about what had actually happened. During this time, Tony was shouting that Ernie was going to be shot, and the argument continued down the stairs, and when Ernie followed Andrea down, Tony was physically poking his finger into Ernie's face, and yet still, Ernie didn't retaliate. Outside the pub, well, Tony Waters met his death in a fight that was ferocious by any man's standards. But when you consider my findings as to how Tony had conducted himself and the provocation Ernie was under, I believe that was far more than my words can convey. Ernie didn't intend for Waters to meet his untimely ending in such a fashion, and was genuinely taken aback when he was charged with murder. Ernie was Sunderland's 4th emergency service, and the similarities between how he and Viv worked were uncanny, although no doubt every major city in the UK can boast a Viv Graham character. I don't believe many can boast an Ernie Bewick character modelled on Rocky Marciano. Where the police couldn't protect people's businesses from being taxed by criminals, Ernie Bewick could protect them. And many a time the services of Ernie were called upon to resolve certain issues that the police stayed away from. Ernie now faced a murder rap, and his club and pub doors were open to being poached by others, seeing this as a power vacuum that they could fill. Davy Binks was a name suggested as one of the people interested in taking over Ernie's doors, but they were soon back into Ernie's realm with the help of Richie Lowes. One of Ernie's men was jumped on by 5 others, and rumour has it that Richie stood up to Davy Binks, although for the sake of protecting both from prosecution, let's just say this was a fairy tale I was told from one of my Chinese whisperers. We've got 2 big names here, as well as a man we'll call Wayne. Wayne, although young, 23, is very mature and powerful for his age, and a fight broke out where he ends up doing well, and again, rumour has it that he told Ernie on a prison visit that no one was taking his doors. Richie won some of Ernie's doors back in Sunderland and Newcastle, and all of this happened during Ernie's period of prison remand, which was for a period of some 14 months. Ernie Bewick remains an enigma. His legend looms large in Sunderland's undercurrent of nightlife and reputation culture. His public record gives us a few concrete facts, the SEIA case, prior conviction, but so much of his myth is held in memory in the grey spaces between fact and fiction. If we come away from this story with a lesson, it is this. Legends in small cities are rarely the pure stuff of myth or truth. They are living fictions we create to anchor identity, fear, respect. As you walk Wearside, lean into the stories, let voice, nuance, contradiction guide the camera. Ernie Bewick may never fully surrender his secrets, but our job is to illuminate what we can and let the audience glimpse how legends are born.
Hey guys, it's me with the story in the day. As you know, I was around in the day, so I couldn't give my opinion to what went on. I really was there. I got to Sunderland quite a lot. Ernie Bewick, one of the best fighters that's ever been in the North East. I used to go up there and see Ernie quite a lot. So I went up one weekend, I went to my Cosworth. Another one I used to give a lift to my Cosworth. Then he used to jump my car and drive around the Cosy up there. They had a graphite grey one when I was up there with Ernie. Anyway, he goes up to see Ernie, gets up there, and we went round a few clubs like we used to do. Went in a few restaurants, we'd have something to eat. Maybe go to there about 8 o'clock, have something to eat. And then we'd have a walk around the clubs and that would he run. And we were in on called Annabelle, so we looked after that for a month with him. I used to go up and see him. And we went around a couple of clubs anyway. We went in one club, but Ernie never had the door. It was the only second club I've ever seen where a doorman had white jackets. The other one was Silks. Well, I'll tell you that story another time. So anyway, we go to the store and they're like being a bit funny in the door. He knew what I was. He was trying to be clever, you know, you think clever people think they're clever because I'll stop cock club and all that shit. And we had this so it goes in. So we goes in the room, I can't remember what it was called, this club, Ernie will remind me. We goes downstairs and we goes in. A long passageway in Sunderland, you went into the left and it was a big massive room, huge. So there's loads of people there, hundreds of people in. And all of a sudden there was like 2 doormen appeared. Then 4, then 5, then 6, I think. And they're in this, you know, like the new telly's that shape. Like that shape around us, as if they said, not circle, but like semicircle. I thought they're fucking, Ernie went, what do you think of this? I said, these fucking daft couldn't think they're going to have a go at Ernie. Ernie says to me, but the biggest fucking mistake I ever said, just fucking let me at these here. Anyway, they stood there and looking over, anyway, one of them come over. I said, do you want to fucking go, you? Do you want to fucking go, do you? And he went, no, we just don't have any trouble. He thought, you come in today, try and take the door or something. I can't take any fucking door, we come in and have a night out, we have a look round and see what we know. A couple of lads come over what we knew and started speaking to me and Ernie, big Brian Lofton, he's a great lad up there. Big Wayne, he's another good kid up there, we used to go and see them, they used to do the doors for Ernie. But so anyway, we're in there, anyway, the doorman in the end were alright to start the talk, but the one the way I was a little bit cheeky again, I went, do you fancy a fucking go with me out in the car park now, you gobshite? You had a little go in the way and the way out, so who do you think you fucking are, you talking to? Cheeky cunt, and he'll give him a shout at the storm on the way out, and his fucking ass went. So as I went outside, it's a bit of a queue, maybe 20 people in a queue. Halfway up the street, well, quite a way up the street. Anyway, I'm coming out and then he got, you're alright, we get out the door because we're getting past people through the door. Anyway, they let a couple in as we went out. So the next section, she's going, you're fucking bastard, and swearing and shouting at this woman, her husband or her boyfriend. And then he's grabbed her and started throwing her around and slapped her and she's hit the floor. And anyway, I've gone over and grabbed him and said, behave yourself. And so she's hit me with a bag or something. Fucking hit me and had a go at me. So I've grabbed her and holding her. I said, I'm trying to fucking help you here. And then I've grabbed her husband and because he's trying to grab me. So I've grabbed him in a choke like that. Got him in a headlock, holding him in this headlock. Fucking behave yourself. She's having to go up behind. Then you could hear, the police coming. Anyway, I get some. Anyway, the fucking cops come for me. Jump out the van, there was a car. Anyway, there was another cop across the road. He was sitting in the car waiting for backup, obviously for these other ones coming. And obviously seen his eyes was not fuck that. Anyway, so the next minute, but I broke the fight up. So the cops are grabbing hold of me and wanting to put handcuffs on him. I said, here, I broke the fucking fight up. No, I've just seen you fight with him, you've had a minute. I said, yeah, I was restraining him, I'm fighting with his wife or whatever she is. So I'm getting a bit annoyed with him, you're fucking taking the piss. And they're grabbing my arms and that. So then he's going, he broke the fight up. Then the doorman's come out and he broke the fight up. He's still he's under arrest, you're under arrest, trying to put these handcuffs on me. What are you fucking doing anyway? The cop that came over from over the road. He come over and he went, no, I know, you've got it wrong. He said, no, wait a minute. He says, he broke it up. So he went, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, mate, and all that. I said, fucking hell, unbelievable. If it wasn't for that cop there. Because when they listened to the doorman, they weren't listening to anyone, they weren't listening to anyone in the fucking street. So this woman, this man are fighting. I'm getting locked up for fucking nothing, for breaking the fight up and them two. And then they turned on the fucking, they started turning on the police. And I'm sure they got locked up as well at the end of the night. I'm so sure she started again with him. And we just walked off, and I'm almost certain he said she got locked up in the end of both of them, put in the back of the van. Yeah, but it just shows you sometimes you can get into a situation to help someone, and you end up getting the blame for it. So yeah, just a little story today with Ernie Bewick. With some fantastic days up there, still on the phone all the time with him. Great person, love him to bits, and speak to you all again soon. Cheers guys for listening to me.